Здравствуйте, дорогие гости.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Startup Village 2021.
Смотрите самое масштабное
You're here with us offline or joining us online for the largest event for startups and tech innovations. We have a very tight schedule for you today, and in just a couple of minutes, we will have the participants of our first session on this very scene.
свободные места.
It is very nice seeing you gathering here for our session, and I believe our online viewers are joining us in their comfy homes. Let me tell you what awaits us today.
Надевайте маски и перчатки.
Please do not forget your masks and gloves while you are exploring the deep space of tech innovations. We have so many passengers on our spacecraft that it is very important to mind your safety. Now on to our program of today.
Технологическим трендом.
Our business programs includes sessions on business transformation and integration of cutting-edge technologies into real life. We have two main programs, the Sun stage and the Earth stage. We also have two virtual stages that you can join in our Venus and Moon lounges. We also have here our Startup Bazaar that you can join whenever you want. We have our regional operators and partner events. This year we hold our bazaar in two formats, both online and offline, where you can meet 200 startups that have new technologies available for you. Please do not forget about our networking service. Using this service, you can have a chat with any representative of any startup or corporation. Please make sure you tick the appropriate box in your settings. Or do not tick this box if you just want to watch our sessions.
Презентуют свой
Also to you are available our mentor hours, where you can receive some very detailed feedback from our mentors on how you can upgrade your team and your idea.
Приходите на мат.
Our pitch sessions will be taking place at Mars stage, where young founders are trying to motivate investors to invest in their projects. Our Pluto stage welcomes you to explore our Q&A sessions with key panelists.
Пообщаться со спикерами.
Make sure you pop in to talk to our speakers. The schedule is available on our website. So today is fully packed for you. Make sure you check out our website to learn more about the schedule of today, and you can click Want to Watch button
Придет время смотреть то, что вас...
if there is a particular session that is of special interest for you. We have more and more people joining us here at the main stage. In just a couple of minutes, we'll have the moderators and speakers of our first session here. So make haste and join us.
Жажда веселья, жажда путешествий, жажда общения. Утоляй любую жажду с освежающими вкусами Липтон. Мой любимый персик.
При низких температурах окружающей среды тела быстро теряют энергию. Но нахождение вблизи источника тепла позволяет телу получать тепловое излучение. Происходит самопроизвольное перераспределение тепла. Следовательно, когда источники тепла находятся вместе, их энергия побеждает холод. Лучшее создается вместе. Газпромбанк.
МТС Стартап Хаб. Работа с реальным бизнес-заказчиком МТС. Доступ к ресурсам самого крупного телеком-бренда в России. Не можешь поверить? А в твой стартап обязательно поверят. У нас есть все, что тебе понадобится. Ресурсы, клиенты, технологии, каналы продаж. Мы оценим твой продукт, правильно применим в своем бизнесе и масштабируем на мировой рынок. МТС Стартап Хаб ждет тебя и твоих нереальных бизнес-идей.
Вот вам, друзья, небольшая информация к размышлению.
Ladies and gentlemen, some food for thought for you. It turns out that Google and other tech companies buy startups even more often than we buy groceries. Since 2001, Google has acquired over 250 technology companies, and last year alone, Google took over about 20 more of them. GE is another giant which has made multiple acquisitions, about 15 in the last 17 years. Russia's major players are still lagging slightly behind, but they also buy startups such as Mail.ru Group, Sberbank, and 1S. For example, Sberbank has bought startup worth on 145 billion rubles, adding around 40 new services to their ecosystem. Other companies are slightly lagging behind because still risk-averse. Which companies should you buy? How make your partnership as successful as possible? What about post-acquisition period? That is something we will discuss today at our session Universal Scale: How to Buy Startups. And I welcome to the stage the moderator of this session, Ivan Sidorov, partner at McKinsey & Company. A round of applause is in order. Let's welcome our moderator. Our panelists are Andrei Beletsky, Managing Director of SAP Labs, Vladimir Sakovich, CEO, Skolkovo Ventures, Alexey Parabachev, General Director of Moscow Agency of Innovations. We are also joined by Vlad Tropko, Managing Partner, Digital Horizon, Natalia Parshikova, SMO, Sber e-Apteka. Hello, Natalia. Welcoming our online speakers, Marie-Hélène Amertsreiter, partner at Speed Invest, and Alexander Galitsky, Managing Partner, Almas Capital. Ivan, over to you now. Thank you. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. What a pleasure it is to be here at this very fruitful, very energetic events. So many companies, so many people, what a wonderful atmosphere. What a joy and pleasure it is to be here today. Today we will be exploring a very interesting topic. It is not about discussing how we can look for investors, but vice versa. We will discuss how to buy startups. I believe for startups it will be very interesting to take a peek behind the stage and to learn how major corporations, how business angels and investors are choosing their startups, how they can offer added value for them. I believe it is very important to understand, to figure out how the other party in the game thinks, to make it beneficial for both sides. Before I would like to dwell a little bit about the corporate world, a couple of interesting facts that kind of came to my mind when I was driving to Skolkovo. Fact number one, 75% of Fortune 100 have their own funds. So virtually, basically every company which leads the capitalization, they buy startups, and that is something to think about. They are very conscious about that. They have their particular reasons to do that, and we'll discuss why they're doing that. Once again, 3/4 of Fortune 100 do that. Some do it as their own VC business, others grow their core businesses through acquiring new startups. It will be very interesting to learn, for example, the experience of SAP. Another interesting fact to look at is the rise of corporate innovations. The speed that we see today at McKinsey is about 20 to 30% per year. So the growth of these corporate funds is enormous, and startups should find the right approach to talk to those funds. It is very important to elaborate your strategy, and that is something that successful startups do. That is the approach that they take. So the topics that we would like to discuss today are as follows. So first, why do we buy startups in the first place? Why huge corporations with enormous budgets cannot innovate on their own? Second topic that we will focus on today is we will discuss what are major corporations looking for when they are vetting startups. So we will take this peek behind the scenes. And then we will focus on how startups get integrated into these ecosystems of major companies. Because sometimes a company would buy a startup, then there are some differences of opinion, I mean, as far as the corporate culture is concerned, and the partnership never succeeds. So we will talk about that too, to understand how startups and companies can work together post acquisition. We have a lot of panelists today. That is why we will have a discussion. And I would love both funds and corporations to talk about all the three questions that I've just voiced. I would like to give the floor now to Alexander Galitsky because he has some very interesting ideas on why you buy startups. Alexander, over to you now. Hello, I do hope that you can hear me loud and clear. So if that is the way you want to phrase the question and you give me just a couple of minutes to answer that, well, let me warn you beforehand that it is quite a tall order. Well, every corporation has its own strategy and they buy startups according to the strategy. You, for example, took Google as an example. and they bought their startups back in the days for around $25 million. They were basically buying engineering teams. Then the process turned out to be more difficult than simply acquiring new teams. So when you buy, you do not necessarily buy startups. Sometimes you would buy a major company. Why you do that? Because you want to grow stronger in a particular field. You feel that competition is getting tougher and tougher, and your competition is offering new products, and you need to beat them with something, not to be thrown out of the market. The third reason why we buy is to push our competition out of the market. There are many examples like that, because if we look, for example, at computing equipment, we can take the example of Digital Equipment Corporation, probably unknown to many of those who are listening to us right now. It was acquired simply to drive it out of the market, because back in those days Microsoft and Windows was trying hard to win over the corporate market. Let's remember Compaq, when they also took over the corporate market thanks to their acquisitions. So these are the reasons why corporations buy startups or even bigger companies. That is the reason why they acquire other entities. Thank you. Let's turn to corporations now. Andrei, what about SAP? Why do you buy startups? Well, that's a good question. Of course, there's three reasons that Alexander enumerated. They're true for us too. Also, for SAP, it is very important to work very closely with our clients. We have more than 440,000 corporate clients. We also work for them post-sales. So we have to cater to the needs of our clients across the board. We have very good sales and we have very good account control. And in order to derive maximum benefits from it and to leverage the investment, we need to buy new products and new categories of products. By not only designing our own products, but also by acquiring products that are available on the market, created by different teams. Another reason why we buy startups is because we need to take other category of products into our portfolio. Of course, we offer enterprise resources management solutions, but we need new categories of products too. It is your classical make or buy decision and go to market. The best example here is probably experience management, where we bought Qualtrics back in 2018, before they actually went for IPO. They were a unicorn, but not a public company. Another example is our acquisition of Contexta Robotics Performance Automation Company. And this year we closed 2 deals with Abgila, low-code, no-code. This is a new technology. There are many companies out there offering similar solutions, but we realize that in terms of corporate software, we have our business clients, our business users, and they want to have the simple tools to derive maximum benefits from the data that is available in their system.
All right, thank you. So most of the time, you give quite simple advice, just, well, buy products, but to buy something, should first find it, right? Alexei, let me ask you this. You represent the city authorities here, so how do you find these new products and technologies, and why do you need them? I think I'd rather boil your question down to this. We, I mean, the city authorities, we don't buy startups per se.
Нам их жалко.
We feel sorry for them because, we really do. What I mean by that is that we try to work with them and help startups work with major corporations, because if a startup doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's hard for them, We have a number of projects. One of them has allowed us to set up around 9 accelerators with the overall number of companies reaching 200 of them.
Партнерами реально.
How many companies have been bought by our partners? 5? No.
Абсолютно точно. 0.
0.
Почему я это говорю? К тому, что на
None of the companies were purchased by anyone.
альтернативы покупки,
What is the alternative to buying a company, buying a startup? Why some say that it should be the first choice, and some say it should not be?
за него в первую очередь, конечно, могу сказать, схема сложилась такая. Мы говорим,
Judging by our experience, I can tell you that in Russia, major corporations, major businesses prefer upsale.
я совершенно согласен. Есть
And I agree with what has been just said. Corporations have their own clients. They have their own channels of interacting with their clients.
что еще мы можем им
The question they ask,
позволить нам в целом.
what else do you got? What else can you offer?
И
Because these corporations, they want to drive revenues up, understandably.
как я это вижу, связано с тем, что
So, in my opinion,
запускаем пилоты,
we
этими корпорациями,
launch pilots with these corporations. They test different services, applications, and products.
очень
As for, well, the industries where we work, well, it's a lot.
открывался, то есть
We cover a whole lot of industries. We are not industry specific. It can be a digital solution, it can be something related to biotech or engineering, anything basically.
выгодней
This is the best way for corporation because they know what they're dealing with and it's easier for them to sign contracts with these companies. They just include them in their own value chain and that's it.
превалирует на рынке.
That model seems to be the prevailing one in the Russian market.
Перейти к следующему.
But how do we make one step forward
Корпорация есть
and evolve? Corporations have their strategic vision, yes, I agree, and of course, this vision dictates what company to buy and what to do. How to solve the problem, I do not know. Maybe my colleagues here will share some thought on this. Okay, colleagues, so every corporation has its own strategic vision, but how do we help these companies start buying startups?
Да, не в целом о мире, потому что все-таки
Well, what I has been saying here has to do with Russia, not with the whole world, because here we have mostly Russian corporations and mostly Russian companies.
компании, корпорации
Why do Russian companies and corporations don't buy startups?
сделок очень мало.
We have
Несколько больших
just a handful of such
секторов
deals made every year.
покупает.
Mail.ru, Yandex, they do buy some startups.
Чего покупает
Sberbank
цифровизация.
does the same too. MTS, the telecom company.
Рынок
But that's probably it. No one else is doing this. Why?
покупают
Why do companies
да, все-таки
prefer to buy startups abroad, like in the US, but these companies we have here in Russia don't do that?
в Америке, если мы
In the US,
некий хороший пример,
if we take it as a benchmark, they want to capitalize their businesses. They want to drive up their performance.
или в
NASDAQ
очень крупными
or
фондами, пенсионными
private active fund or pension fund, it's all about capitalization. In Russia,
70
this
корпораций, но просто не пример.
indicator, well, is not really applicable to lots of companies. It's not a KPI, it's not their goal to drive their capitalization up. That's true for many companies in Russia. That is why they believe that it's not feasible to buy startups because you have to pay a lot and you don't get a lot in return.
Сейчас,
Therefore, corporations don't buy startups in Russia.
но все-таки свет в конце туннеля есть. Многие
Yet, I believe there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think more and more companies now consider buying startups.
почему M&A для больших
M&A, why for major corporations it's better than go to an accelerate and get something from it? First, speed. It's way quicker, way faster this way. In a year or two, you can see tangible results,
Эффект это значит, что
good impact on your business.
либо вашем P&L, либо ваша капитализация
So it's either going to drive your capitalization up or overall performance will be better.
будет корпоративная.
There is a lot of venture funds,
Вы увидите через 3-5,
but it doesn't really matter because anyway, you're going to see that positive effect very soon.
корпорации даже
Russian corporations don't have enough patience. They don't want to wait for 5 or 7 years to get any results.
за 7 лет сменится менеджмент.
Like Moscow can afford that. And yet we know that the management will change, the authorities will change in 7 years, and everyone will just forget about this startup. So there is no, continuity.
Корпорациям в работе с
And a lot of corporations in Russia don't have that continuity. So
Сейчас в России еще очень популярно
that is why we sometimes have to say that it's not the best way for Russian companies to buy startups.
предприятие. Почему
Another way is to start a joint venture,
предприятие? Потому что это дешевле.
as for some can be preferable compared to M&A.
Там поможет
It's good because you don't have to pay a lot,
бесплатно что-то сделать.
and sometimes almost for free you get a lot of feedback. So far, I can tell you that joint ventures haven't been a lot of success in Russia. Most of them turn out to be failure.
Жить на каких-то
That's because it's hard to, act as equals. It's easy to agree that no one is investing anything, not too many risks, but in a year or two, the two partners, they have increasing number of arguments, they start to quarrel, and that all ends up
коллективный обман.
not in a good way. So a lot of people say that joint ventures are good, but I can tell you they are not. Probably this trend will continue for another year or two, but after that it will come to an end, and we will come back to mergers and acquisitions. Yes, you pay a lot for a startup
Более взрослую компанию, то есть
or a more mature company. Yes, you pay a lot, that's true.
вы еще платите.
5, 10 annual revenues, but that's your company. That's now part of your portfolio, and you own it. You can do what you want, and you get all the results for yourself.
Ситуация выглядит
That's how it looks like at this point. I mean, in broad strokes, nothing too specific here. And this situation doesn't seem to be changing.
про M&A вообще никто не
5 years ago,
банк, который мы
no one knew what M&A was.
Яндекс был
Sberbank, Yandex, the biggest tech players, didn't know about it. I mean, didn't use it. They just would buy teams, equities,
по их компании.
and that's it.
Но сейчас ситуация меняется.
Now the situation seems to be changing, but only so a little bit. You mentioned capitalization. It's a good idea. Companies don't buy startups because they don't understand how it's going to impact their businesses, so they prefer joint ventures to test it all out. Companies are not accustomed to risking, to winning and losing. I think we can go to Marie Helen to know what is happening in Europe. Well, we are yet too afraid of risking. What about Europe? How are you doing in Europe? I know that, mistakes are okay, but do you think that mistakes are okay? And how much time does it take for you to buy a company?
Yeah, with pleasure. Hello, everyone. Maybe to give a bit of a context. So Speed Invest is a venture capital company, and we are invested in more than 200 startups all across Europe. And why is this whole topic of M&A so important also to the VC industry? So I am specialized to invest in startups purely in that industry 4.0, so everything around industrial tech and climate tech, helping European corporates to grow and to innovate also in the future. Not every one of these startups is going to be a unicorn, and therefore it is important to have this exit channel in the corporate world, so that corporates are procuring these startups. This is important for the performance and the returns also for a venture capital fund. What we see is that in the US, corporates are spending 4 times as much on startup acquisitions than European companies would do. Not only that, it is on the valuations especially. So for taking over a startup, a US corporate would spend or would be willing to pay 3 times as much as an average European company would do for this takeover. And what's the consequence of that? Because, of course, the startup can get a much higher exit proceed, they would rather sell to the US corporation than to the European one. So by now, 27% of the European startups are exiting to US corporates. So we really have the sales of talent and the outflow of talent, the brain drain in a way, of these very innovative young companies to the US. So I think this is alarming signals, and we are really fortunately seeing now first dynamics on the European market that corporates start and are more willing to take over startups. What we have learned is that the successful takeovers are also always starting with a good collaboration. It is very hard to jump from zero to acquire startups and integrate them successfully. But very happy maybe to talk about this successful integration a bit later.
Thanks a lot, Mary. Очень интересный комментарий, на самом деле, коллеги. То есть вот есть не
It's been very interesting to listen to you. Thank you so much. Why buy?
по сути,
Why?
свою базу больше, чтобы заместить как
To sell more? To get a new technology? To replace your own technology? To get something fast because you can buy it and integrate it real fast? Colleagues say that in Russia, businesses are not ready to pay. They want to be partners, not buyers.
будет меняться.
I hope that this kind of philosophy will change and we'll have more deals closed. There'll be more experiments, more successful exits. I hope we will evolve over time.
Может быть,
Maybe any ideas regarding this issue?
я бы хотел,
Alexei, maybe?
я абсолютно согласен.
I absolutely agree that speed is important.
Корпоративную часть, если мы говорим про
Previously, I talked about the corporate side of the question. Now let's talk about cities and municipal authorities. Cities don't buy startups, understandably.
Барселоны,
But look at Barcelona
это отдельная
and China. But China is a whole different issue. Now, Barcelona set up a municipal fund
urban tech,
which would help urban tech startups to help them take off.
технологическое развитие.
This way, speeding up the modernization of the city infrastructure. So they specifically invested in companies which could eventually be scaled up and help Barcelona to reach greater efficiency, performance, prosperity.
Все, что касается испаноговорящих стран, у них
And by the way, Barcelona is quite an interesting market because it gives access to South America and all the Spanish-speaking countries. It turned out that this wasn't the best possible instrument. On the one hand, the city was kind of an accelerator in and of itself. It gave access to infrastructure, it gave access to companies to roll out their solutions real fast.
потом он
But
фактически
on the other hand,
дали тормозом, потому что,
it acted as a brake.
несмотря на то, что это европейские
It
союзы, на то,
pulled back some of the startups. Yes, it was the EU, and this was not federal or budget money.
цепочки принятия,
And yet, the decision-making was too cumbersome,
как это
too long and ineffective.
в совете директоров сидел обязательно.
So there was a person representing the city on the board of directors, and it all ended up in a lot of bureaucracy. It started good, but it ended in a lot of
Такую структуру
bureaucracy. It was too slow. So, in the context of cities and towns and city companies who are in charge of managing infrastructure,
входят в капитал.
these organizations, municipal organizations, can join a different company, can buy a share of the company or of this company a whole, but it's not going to be any good because there is a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of, problems in that. Okay, good. Now, let's proceed to our second question. What should we be looking for, or what should we be looking at when we decide whether to buy a company? Some corporations want this, venture capitalists want that. Andrew, can I start with you? Could you tell us something good, something, inspiring? All right. Sometimes it's not the best idea to look at the figures because startups or a company which is going to be bought may be quite limited in its performance. Qualtrics, I mentioned this example. It was bought for $8 billion before its IPO, and there's a lot of criticism in the media regarding this deal. A lot of venture capitalists were not satisfied. They thought that was too high price. The companies were racing to buy it. This became a bad example, and yet I can tell you that the financial specialists did not expect it, but the capitalization of this company reached $30 billion. It's real fast. So SAP made a very good decision, something which we thought would be risky, but we did it. We decided to let some part of the company go, and there was IPO, and we retained 85% of its shares, which was fine. Qualtrics revenue is part of our balance sheet. So it was a very good leap from 8 to 30 billion. And we never looked at the figures, you see. We looked at our clients. We looked at how we can scale it up at the maximum. It just was perfect strategic and product match. It's not only figures, you see. All right, can I ask you a follow-up question? At what stage are you ready to buy a company? Idea, product, team, revenue, clients, competing solutions, or competing strategies? Because Qualtrics is a good example, but they had competition, they had their product. So you, as a company, at what stage are you ready to buy a startup?
Well, that's a complicated question. I mean, both. If we look at Sapphire Ventures, a venture fund which is not under our management, they buy pretty mature companies. I mean, they buy a lot of equity. For example, they invested in LinkedIn, Fitbit, Square, and many others. In recent years, they actually invested into around 130 companies with tickets of more than 10 million. And our corporation buys mature companies who have their product and their market. But of course, there are some exceptions when you have to be agile, when you have to be quick, when you scout for new technologies, say. And Recast.ai, for example, is a Paris company, Paris-based company that designed the most successful chat box. Plat1 is a company that we bought at a pretty early stage. It is important to mention here that we do not only go for M&A, but we also have our corporate accelerators such as SNP.io. And by the way, the head of our global network of accelerators spoke at Startup Village yesterday. And these accelerators, they work with seed and pre-seed startups. Because what it does for us, I mean, this network of accelerators, it makes us see some new technologies that probably cannot be capitalized today, but that will be strategically important in 5 or 4 years. And with these conditions, we are ready to work at a very early stage if they have MVP. Let us now give the floor to Alexander Galitsky. Alexander, some people say that you should buy startups that have good things to offer. But what about a more transactional approach? Well, first of all, let me comment on what previous panelists have said. First of all, we all have a strategy. For example, in our portfolio, we had a company, Sensitin, that offered smart city solutions. And it spent $2 million per month, only making $1 million. And we supported it quite dedicatedly. And it was then acquired by Verizon, and the price was pretty substantial, despite of the fact that the company was actually in the red. That is something that is only possible in the US, but the startup that we sold, they offered smart city solution, and that is why they became successful eventually, and now they are evaluated at a couple of $1 billion. If we talk about accelerators, I believe we should have the right understanding of how an accelerator works. Venture capitalists and corporations who have their own venture funds, we all work in a different way. For example, let's take Microsoft. Microsoft never really invests. Microsoft would build a model that would enable it to monitor efficiently what is happening around them. And after that, they would buy companies that were ready for the taking, that had their products and their markets. Other companies create their own cloud ecosystems, and then they fill these ecosystems with new startups. Many of them choose to work with A-series companies, presenting them to their own clients. Another method of acceleration works as follows. What they do is they invite entrepreneurs to tackle some particular tasks. And normally it is the corporation who sets the task, because a corporation always has a plethora of issues to tackle. And after that, after the acceleration program is complete, the corporation would invite venture funds. And basically what it will do, it will give those startups that it vetted for their own needs to those venture capitalists. And that is something that happens on a regular basis. Because quite often, if a corporation buys a mature company with a good product, it doesn't guarantee success. It is hard to integrate such a company. That is why it makes perfect sense to look at some startups at earlier stages, especially if you have tasks ready for these entrepreneurs, for these startups to tackle. They will offer you a very concrete solution, and after that, you will have a very nice deal. Before round B, it doesn't make sense to invest in a startup, because competing corporations will look at this startup not as at a potential asset, but as at a competitor. Thank you. Let's turn to Alexei, representing Moscow Agency of Innovations. Alexei, How do you look at startups?
На что смотрит город, как
Well, as I've already
действует со стороны.
told you, we do not buy startups because we represent the city of Moscow, which makes us very different from major companies, from corporations, from business units of any business entity.
Ключевых моментов вот
For us, when we work with startups,
в технологическом сообществе.
the key element that we are looking for is the following. First,
Внутренние
we as the city have a set of our own priorities that we would like to work on in every sector. And that is something that was really highlighted during the pandemic because we
автоматизирование
needed to deploy technologies and do so very swiftly in the healthcare sector. We needed technologies that would enable us to do lung imaging very quickly and to determine how damaged they are by COVID. That is why the city started to work with startups and companies who offered smart vision solutions to help us with these tasks. And after that, what we did, we gave them sets of data to use it as learning material for their solution, which of course was based on machine learning. So for us, a priority is what the company can offer to the city. After that, what we do,
готовая уже технология.
we look at
Второй будет критерий.
the stage of readiness of the technology that
Это не
startups have to offer. And of course, we ask the startup whether they're ready to work with the city, because a city is not a company. It is more difficult to work with the city, and despite of the fact that we try to be as user-friendly as possible, startups should understand that if they want to work with the city, they will have to spend their resources on that, and if they're ready, we start the work.
Супер, очень интересно.
Okay, I see.
Либо по любви равно по стратегии, либо за деньги, либо вот за...
So it's either a matter of very special
Спасибо, Владимир.
affection because the startup has something to offer to the city. I see.
На ранней стадии, может быть.
Об этом много говорят вчера, сегодня. Вот, я бы все-таки про M&A сказал.
I would like to focus on M&A
Оглашалось, на что
to
смотрят
couple it with everything that we said before. We as strategists, we close around 5 to 10 M&A deals every year. Earlier this year, we
смотрят российские стратегии,
sold one company. We now have
какие-нибудь другие стратегии.
5 deals that are underway.
То есть, если вы приходите в какой-нибудь банк, не будем его называть, и говорите,
Let's say you come to a bank, and as a startup, you say, you know, there is this another bank who's interested in me, and they gave me the term sheet. That will make this another bank look at you more carefully. So if you want to solve your business, make this process competitive. Talk to various strategists, not only with those who came to you first. That will increase
выстраивать систему,
the possibility of actually selling your company.
и узнавали о каком-то стартапе, чем ваши конкуренты. Что если
And as a corporation, you need to study the market. You need to make sure you learn about some interesting startups before your competition does,
комментарии
to approach them first. Another thing that I would like to mention,
те компании,
the majority of M&A deals are carried out by public companies
и все эти компании
who want to stay as open as possible.
сделали
And when they carry out those deals, of course, they always think about how this deal will be perceived by the market and how to communicate appropriately why they went for this deal and how this will impact their quotation and
придумать, как эта корпорация не только внутри
how it will influence their stance on
а широкая публика
in the market.
становится все важнее, потому что очень много крауд-сделок надо.
It is also important to mention that today the general public becomes more and more important here because there are many crowd deals these days.
Личности, любой M&A
So for a corporation, it is very important to strategize when it comes to marketing and promotion when they go for an M&A deal. Sometimes they do not do that, and
в России все обращают внимание, что мы
their stocks dwindle as a result,
технологический стек, про то, насколько синергия
which is something that no company wants to see as the result of the deal that they close. Thank you.
Про влияние на публичный облик. И вот
It is very interesting to elaborate on how an M&A can influence the public image of the company. Because a deal should be beneficial for the company who acquires the startup. Maria Lynn, could you please give your comment on that? Probably on the public image of the company. Maybe there are some differences of opinion.
I think it's not just the public, appearance and branding and reputation in a way, but it is effect. I mean, there is, and you said it in the beginning with the Fortune 500 companies, there is also a study that is proving the so-called lighthouse companies are the leading industrials. They have overarching activity on the M&A side, as well as the collaboration with startups. But I'd like maybe to look a bit also from the startup perspective, because we're talking a lot about M&A, that there is free choice if a corporate would decide to buy a startup. The best startups are really hard to get. Because if they are successful, of course, plenty of companies would either like to get a stake in the company, or the startup would like to more or less go for an IPO and stay independent on the market. So I think first for a corporate, it is really, really important to be clear what's the aim, what's my strategy, why do I want to take over a startup? Is it to nurture and innovate my core business? Is it to building up new business opportunities and to diversify? Is it to more or less consolidate and preempt any potential competitors in the future? And I think to have a very clear understanding on what the aim and objective is will help to identify potential takeover candidates or acquisition targets. I think to have a successful acquisition, usually, as I said before, it's very important to build trust towards this company and towards the startup. And to build trust, it's important to collaborate closely, to pay, even if it's a pilot project, and to, act on fair terms. This is not a supplier. A startup is the opportunity for co-creation. It is necessary to build an environment that this collaboration is working. You have to set apart all the procedures and processes that would usually apply to a supplier. And you have to be really, really tough with timings in your corporate environment. They don't have the breadth to, work and collaborate and negotiate for months and months and months. Usually their financing, their runway is a couple of months, and they need a decision and a clear indication. Is there a potential outcome, and what is the potential outcome of this collaboration or these talks? I think also to make this successful, it's really a lot about valuations and being clear on what is the corporate prepared to spend on such a takeover. And you will not be successful if you apply discounted cash flow methods or any standard M&A valuation methods, because very often these startups, they don't even have an EBITDA, a positive one. And there is very different principles how to evaluate and calculate these valuations. So the other thing also to make it successful, where you have internally within your corporation, be clear, it's a risky game. Cisco, for example, who are spending some 300 million per year in startups and did some more than 200 takeovers. For them, it's clear. They know not all the 100% of takeovers will work out, but that 30% approximately will be a failure and will not be successful. But they know also that the 70% that they take over more or less will secure the market leadership also in the future. And I think this, to be very conscious about this risk that you take with accepting a failure rate is a prerequisite to make such a strategy also successful.
Marilyn, thanks a lot for comments. Very insightful. Thanks a lot. Друзья, наверное, будем двигаться к следующему вопросу.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our next question. But before that, I would like to give the floor to Vlad from Digital Horizon. Vlad, could you please tell us at what indicators are you looking in a startup when you're considering an M&A deal? Thank you for the question. I would like to speak about something that previous panelists didn't really touch upon. We look at the team and we look at the culture of the startup. We work with a venture fund, and one of its main clients are corporations, and they do not know how to grow startups because they do not have the right processes. Well, okay, never mind why, they simply do not do that, okay? So what they cannot do also is they cannot identify real entrepreneurs, and that is our task. We look for people with this right entrepreneurial spirit who can design a product from scratch. And that is something that should be done outside of the corporation. And also we work with startups as a venture fund. For us, it is very important to consider the experience that founders have. For example, on Friday, my friend from London sold a company for $500 million. And when I was congratulating him, he told me, it was not me, it was my team. They helped me to build this company.
One of the reasons why corporations buy startups is that they simply cannot find these entrepreneurs. They can hire them. They're not interested in this. It's easier to buy the whole startup and chain it, with gold chains to itself for a couple of years at least. And in this time, they can improve their processes. They can get a lot of benefits from this startup. As for Wave Optics, it was purchased for $500 million, and I know that Snap grew by 5 billion per one day after buying this company. That's just one example of how good PR and the right kind of deal can drive your capitalization up. Wave Optics is not going to give any revenue in the next 2, 4, even 5 years. It was a moonshot, It is expected to give some returns only in 7 to 10 years. It will be good for Snap's business, but not today. Okay, that was a good complementary idea to what we've been discussing. PR, strategy, capitalization, future. So you can buy things which are only draining money, but can give you a lot in the future. In Russia, we don't think strategically, and we need to change that mindset. And best of success to your friend. It was a really good deal. Now, if we don't have any new comments, I have but one comment. I just want to say that you buy products, you buy skills, you buy team. That's right. You mentioned founders. SAP had a number of stories in its history when companies which we bought for a lot of money played a key role. But it was the founder who played the biggest role. It joined our board, or maybe it was corporate officer after that. Cases differ, but we knew and we know how to be bold. In 2009, when I was already working with the company, we had Acquisition Success Factory, and there was one good story with a cloud-based HR, software as a service-based company, and the founder of this company, he represented the very best. He represented the whole new idea, you know, and there was a lot of marketing campaigns when he just came and talked to his probable partners. Look, that's not SAP of your forefathers, that's SAP of your grandchildren. We are the future, and he was selling it. He was really good. And we know that founders can be immensely important. Charlie Magassi, you probably know that name. I participated in a number of conferences with IT directors from Germany in Frankfurt, and Shai Agassi, when he came up to the stage and started pitching about new service-oriented architecture, that was a hugely energetic performance. He became manager of the board after his company was bought. So skills, engineers, teams, and founders, these are the key components. Okay. If we buy something, how do we make it so it doesn't break it? Golden chains, that was a good metaphor. I mean, very suitable in sometimes. And there is a good example here in the audience, Natalia right here. She works at the e-Apteka, which is an online pharmacy. Could you please share your experience? How do you feel? Well, it's cold here. Well, I hope it doesn't feel that cold after your M&A. No, it was just a joke. I've been listening to all of you, and here's what I want to add. You buy a company when you want to add competencies. You don't have that competency, you want it. You buy a company, and that's it. Of course, founders are important, because if a person is a leader and knows the market, and you don't know the market, and you don't know any of what is required to become successful, of course you need someone to guide you, to help you out. It's all about leadership and managing, good managing. At Sber, previously known as Sberbank, we know that corporate culture is important, and we try to adjust our corporate culture so that new companies would feel more comfortable. IT, infrastructure, products, everything. There is a lot of concessions made towards new companies, so we have a lot of leeway, and that's good because we need some time to adjust. And instead of trying to comply, we can work freely, and that's important. Synergy is important. You should make it happen so that the two sides will come together and work as a clock. People who lead startups, people who are in charge of M&A, and then who are in charge of integrating the startup into something bigger, these people need to be focused, laser focused on what they're doing. They should not be intervening a lot. They should be guiding, helping. So yes, it all boils down to people. People are very important. I hope you feel warmer after that. After M&A, I hope you'll feel warmer. Again, jokingly. Okay, Andrei, I know that you have a lot to say, but I would like to first ask Alexei. Alexei, I know that you don't buy companies. And a lot of experts and corporates believe that it's hard to work with city authorities. But what should startups do to actually get to you and maybe engage in some kind of partnership? First, let's look at this from the standpoint of finance. Doesn't matter what stage you are on. It doesn't matter. Because we can help you out at almost every stage. We can pilot your product or service. Education, healthcare, transportation, it doesn't matter. Any area. Integration can be painful. That's true. But I agree with one thing. Some startups have products which are ready, but there are teams with great ideas, prototypes sometimes, but they don't have their first sales, they have no clients, no consumers, and we're ready to work with such companies too. For that, we have the seed fund of Moscow. It does not invest. It's different. It has its own formula behind its work. It gives a loan, and this loan is supported by a share of the company. So we give out a loan if this company gets a private investor who is ready to invest private money into it. So this fund, it's, an additional leverage that this company can get to get more money and actually launch its product. It's up to 36 million rubles. That's not much. We know it. And yet, for a beginner, for a young startup, that's good enough. We take a lot of interest in learning how to work better with companies of such companies as startups. We want to help them out so they could implement their ideas, launch their products faster, and upscale what they have to offer. There are three problems. First, 90% of startups that come to us, they are digital startups. It doesn't matter. Take any area, any field, construction, education, it's all underpinned by digital technologies. And the main thing they want from the city is data. They want data from us. There's a huge question mark here. How do we as a city can give data to these companies? Anti-COVID efforts required us to use personal data for MRIs of lungs. It was one example. So we need to form sets of data which will be later on given to these companies to work on, so they could test their products on it. And that's problematic. That's a problem not only for Moscow, for any major corporation, company, city, doesn't matter. If you want to have good data, you have to invest into this. You need to calculate everything. That's problem number one. Problem number two, access to infrastructure. I think we've solved that more or less because we have pilot testing program in Moscow, and the idea behind this program is that we as an innovative agency, we are a one-stop shop for these startups. Any company can start testing anything that it wants within the common sense and, the law of the Russian Federation. So we want you to test your product, but it should be safe and law compliant. We have 120 testing grounds and sandboxes covering almost every area of city life, every aspect of city life. We just moderate the work. Imagine a hospital and a startup which wants to share its new technology of, say, measuring temperature. A hospital, a city hospital, and a startup, it's like two different universes. It's as if a person from Venus is trying to talk to a person from Mars. It's just incredible. They don't talk the same language. And we are here to help, to bridge the gap between startups and hospitals and similar city institutions. We moderate, we guide, we help to communicate. And we have, as I said, lots of platforms and lots of programs to make that kind of
Это win-win.
connection happen. I think it's a win-win situation for all. We get interesting ideas, products, and services which we can use for the benefit of the city, and companies get good experience on how to roll out our products, and that's something they can show to their future investors. So that's their success case, and that's good traction for them.
Инфраструктуре. И третья тема — это доступ к клиентам.
And problem number 3, access to clients.
История наименее проработанная.
I think that's the least
Почему? Потому что
studied area so far. We all live in Moscow, in the suburbs of Moscow, in other cities, and you probably know that the city has a way of communicating with you on a number of issues,
возможность
notifying you, telling something to you directly. And what we need to do is to get feedback from you. To test a business hypothesis, we need to be able to have good feedback, reliable feedback from you. And it's hard for big organizations who are in charge of
зрения его распаковки.
modernizing cities.
Что я конкретно имею в виду? Ну, вот
Let me explain.
есть, не знаю,
Imagine you have
Самокат.
например, самокат. Да.
a startup, like
Кстати, кейс.
the one with
Значит,
bicycles, and you know those bicycles you just step on and you can just push it with your leg. Across Moscow, we have 7 startups
самокат шеринга, причем
who offered
электрические,
sharing services. Some of them were electric scooters, some were just kick scooters. We installed some of them at our own platform, at our own facility. Some of them were installed across the city. And we tried to measure which of the scooters were the best. And you can do that only if we give people, city dwellers, access to these solutions, to these promising products. And that's what we do. That's what we are trying to fine-tune, to get better feedback from people. Okay, Andrea, over to you now, because I think you have something to say. You have probably your own point of view. Yes, thank you, Ivan. Good question, really. What happens post-merger? That's a good question. Integration, that's what happens. You integrate in teams, cultures, you help startups to get, familiar and comfortable. Yesterday we discussed a lot the fact that you shouldn't just be educating startups, how they should communicate with corporations. There is a problem with corporations themselves. Operational managers and top managers, they do not know how to communicate with startups as well, and we need to educate them. So this is a two-way street. We need to help integration happen smoothly. Some say it's bad that SAP buys products or platforms or support processes, but why is it bad? We're trying to do a lot of unifying, a lot of seamless transition and integration. We want it to be seamless. We want to work for our clients, because sometimes clients are afraid that a startup solution can be inferior in terms of cybersecurity, for example, and maybe there'll be some wrong data or there'll be some intrusion in the systems. But for me, here in Moscow, given the fact that we do R&D and lots of similar things, it's okay to work with startups. We give a lot of support to our startups in order to ensure that it's all safe and secure. Because as soon as something enters our price lists, then it means that we can guarantee 100% security, performance, and everything else which comes with it. We'll give just the same support as we give to products which has been around for years. Andrei, can you ask you about the marketplace or a marketplace as a means of reaching your clients? I think that's something for people here which they can find interesting. Okay, marketplaces, I think it's been a buzzword for quite a long time. We have SAP Store. It's our own marketplace with a lot of products on offer. I think it's over 1,800 solutions on display. Half of them are startups, actually. It's a win-win. For startups from Russia or any other country, this is a good opportunity to showcase their products. They can go to our app store and they get access to 400,000 clients across the world. As for our clients and consumers, they get guarantees. It's, it's almost impossible for a huge corporation to suddenly visit a website of a really small company somewhere. This just doesn't happen. But our marketplace is a good place for these corporations to browse new ideas and products and services. Our Western partners and clients sometimes look through our portfolio to see what we have in the East and vice versa. German and Austrian companies find a lot of good solutions from Russia. Merco, that's the name of the company. It has Russian roots, in-store, on the channel, marketing company. They joined Substore last year. XOR, another company, and many other companies are very good success stories in that sense. Alexander mentioned something I agree with. For startups, it would be not the right thing to join the corporations at an early stage. You'll be associated with that brand and you won't be interesting for others because you'll be associated with one brand only. It's better for you to go to a marketplace because this way you showcase your products, you get exposure, and you get support from a huge brand. A lot of clients of that huge brand can see you, you get good statistics, and your valuation goes up. Take a look at SAP. If we have a product on our marketplace, it doesn't mean it's bought by SAP. It's just on display with our help and support. Okay, it's time to wrap it up, so let's have 1 minute of good wishes and maybe pieces of advice to startups here in Russia and abroad. So can you say something that our startups could really use as a takeaway from this session?
Пожелать там готовы.
Okay, so
Стартапам чего? У них все
I mean, as far as startups are concerned, everything is going well for them. I mean, for good startups. If you have a bad startup, go make a new one.
разговор про корпорации, да?
And as far as corporations are concerned, to them I would wish to be more persistent.
Генеральный директор сказал, что нужно входить или акционер.
Many corporations
И думаю,
are looking for startups because their CEO told him to do so. And they think that he can become innovative in a couple of weeks. And there is a lot of disappointment afterwards. And same goes for acquisitions. Some think that if you buy one company, one startup, you become this tech giant. It will take you many years to transform, to become a truly digital leader. The example of SAP here is very interesting. It was digital from day one, yet still it had this enormous journey of becoming what it is today. So please remember that in order to integrate startups into your ecosystem, you need years and you need a lot of agility and patience. And of course, top management of a company should be interested in investing in startups, because if they're not, no matter what your
превалировать своей важности.
team does, it will never really take off, and your innovation process will simply fizzle out. So the corporation should be motivated, starting from the CEO and all the way down to
Первым лицам она понравилась. И
your interns.
акселератор
And of course,
не дают не очень
you need to have this robust system which will enable you to implement innovations. It is not enough simply to acquire a company. think beforehand of what you're going to do with it afterwards. Thank you. Alexander, your closing remarks. Well, I would like to call upon corporations to design their strategies for several years ahead. Any corporation, any big company should be innovative. It should digitalize its business processes. It is the question of your survival, so be mindful of your strategy. And your strategy should be agile and well thought through. And of course, remember that you should be quick when it comes to decision making, especially when acquiring good startups. Otherwise, it will be very hard for Russia to innovate. Thank you. Thank you. Alexei?
У меня очень практическое
Well, I will be very practical.
обращение, наверное, к компаниям.
In my closing remarks and in my closing address, if you will, to corporations, we as the city act as a bridge. We help startups reach out to companies and vice versa, creating this environment where they could all talk to each other. And for us to understand to a greater extent what your needs are and what the needs of the corporations are, we created our own web portal of Moscow Innovation Cluster, where you can learn about our programs. And please be critical. Please tell us what we are missing here. Because we really want to act as a bridge, helping startups talk to companies and go through acquisition if that is something that they want. But we want to make sure that we offer you everything you need for it. So please take a look at our programs and reach out to us and tell us what are we missing. Thank you. Thank you, Alexei. Andrei? Well, I have been with SAP for 23 years now, and I would like to urge managers of companies to make sure that they have this strategic vision despite they have their day-to-day activities. Please make sure you look at what is happening around. And new innovations emerging. Remember about that. Marie-Hélène, please.
Well, I think maybe two advice from a startup perspective. First, choose your first investor wisely, your VC, if it's a VC, because these first investors will guide you and will help you in your journey ahead. Is there a moment to sell? When is the right moment? What's the right M&A boutique and so on? And the second would be think global from the very first moment on. So try to set your company in a way that it can sell globally. We are in the digital world and business. Thank you.
Спасибо большое. Друзья, мы потихонечку завершаем сессию. У нас осталось буквально минутка.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are wrapping up our session. Thank you so much for joining us today. We would like to thank our audience for staying with us through this discussion. Do buy startups, and best of luck.
Огромное спасибо.
We thank the moderator and panelists of our first session of the day here at Sunstage.
Как вы догадываетесь, первая Newsmaster называется еще множество сегодня.
And I believe you all know all too well that we'll be having much more sessions today at this stage and at other stages as well. So please do look through our timetable for today and find what is interesting for you. If you are here at Skolkovo, join us offline, and if you are watching online, please remember about a great many activities that are available to you. Because some of these options are unique to our online viewers. If you want to talk to investors, you don't have to track him down here at Skolkovo. Please register on our website, pay for your participation, talk to investors, rate our sessions, talk to other participants, visit our Startup Bazaar online, learn more about interesting innovations, ask questions. And please do not forget to share things that you find interesting on your social networks. We also have a very special networking tab where you can talk to people in our chat with the only one rule: please do not swear, you will be banned for it. If you prefer that, you can talk to other participants in our Telegram chat, or, for that matter, you can send direct messages to other participants, and do not forget to answer those DMs that you receive. You will have a notification reminding you that you have a DM waiting for you. If you do not wish to talk to other people, please untick the box in your settings. So if you are still not registered at startupvillage.ru, do so now to have a productive day. Thank you so much for your attention.
низких температурах окружающей среды тела быстро теряют энергию. Но нахождение вблизи источника тепла позволяет телу получать тепловое излучение. Происходит самопроизвольное перераспределение тепла. Следовательно, когда источники тепла находятся вместе, их энергия побеждает холод. Лучшее создается вместе. Газпромбанк.
МТС Стартап Хаб. Работа с реальным бизнес-заказчиком МТС. Доступ к ресурсам самого крупного телеком-бренда в России. Не можешь поверить? А в твой стартап обязательно поверят. У нас есть все, что тебе понадобится. Ресурсы, клиенты, технологии, каналы продаж. Мы оценим твой продукт, правильно применим в своем бизнесе и масштабируем на мировой рынок. МТС Стартап Хаб ждет тебя и твоих нереальных бизнес-идей.